Imagine relaxing by your own pool, and the police show up because your neighbors think you don't belong. You ever notice how peace can turn into chaos in a split second? That's exactly what happened on a warm Saturday in Scottsdale, Arizona. It started like one of those perfect days you wish you could freeze. The sun was high, but not brutal. The sky a clean sweep of blue with barely a cloud. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance, the kind of background sound you barely notice when life feels good. Adrian Colbert leaned back on a teak lounge chair by his infinity pool, sunglasses on, tablet in hand. The man had worked hard for this, harder than most could even imagine. 44 years old, founder of one of the fastest-growing tech security companies in the US, a guy who had seen poverty up close as a kid and decided early on that he'd never let that define him. Now, he was worth hundreds of millions, though you wouldn't know it from how calm and low-key he looked in his gray swim trunks and plain white t-shirt. The pool sparkled in the afternoon sun, a flawless mirror reflecting rows of palm trees that framed his backyard. Beyond the fence, you could see Camelback Mountain in the distance, glowing orange under the Arizona sun. Adrian's phone buzzed with a notification, something about a board meeting next week. He ignored it. Today wasn't about meetings or investors. It was about doing absolutely nothing. He took a slow sip from his glass of iced tea, condensation dripping down onto his coaster. Life was finally quiet. No deadlines, no alarms, no noise. Just the rhythmic splash of water every time a breeze brushed across the pool's surface. He smiled to himself, thinking about how far he'd come, from those cramped apartments in Oakland to this sprawling estate in one of Scottsdale's most exclusive neighborhoods. Then came the shadow. At first, he didn't even notice. It slid across his legs like a passing cloud, except there weren't any clouds. Adrian glanced up and saw two figures standing just outside his wrought iron fence, a man and a woman, mid-50s, maybe early 60s. The man wore khaki shorts and a pale blue golf shirt tucked in too tight, his arms folded like a security guard at a concert. The woman had a floppy sun hat and a posture that screamed judgment. Adrian pulled his sunglasses down slightly, eyes narrowing but not hostile. They weren't smiling. The man was the first to speak. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice carrying that sharp edge of entitlement Adrian knew too well. "Can we help you with something?" Adrian blinked, tilting his head. "Help me? I'm good, thanks." His tone was light, almost friendly. The woman stepped closer, gripping the fence bars like she was checking if they were real. "This is private property," she said slowly, each word like a drop of acid. Adrian's brows knit, but his voice stayed calm. "Yes, ma'am, it is." The man's jaw tightened. "So, who exactly are you?" Adrian felt that familiar flicker inside him, the one that said, "Here we go." He set his glass down and sat up straight. "Who am I? Well, that's a long story, but for now, let's just say I'm someone enjoying his Saturday by his pool." The woman's eyes narrowed. "We've never seen you here before. This is a quiet community. People don't just show up." Adrian smiled faintly, like he'd heard this 1,000 times. "You're right. People don't just show up, especially behind a gate that costs as much as some people's houses." They didn't laugh, neither did he. The tension hung in the dry Arizona air, thicker than the heat waves rolling off the pavement. But that was only the beginning, because their curiosity wasn't about to stop there. The man shifted his weight like he owned the place. He kept his arms folded, his face tight, eyes darting between Adrian and the pool like he was scanning for evidence. "You didn't answer my question," he said, his voice louder now. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Adrian took a slow breath. He knew that tone. He'd heard it in airports, at car dealerships, in boardrooms where people assumed he was the intern and not the guy who wrote the checks. He reached for his glass again, deliberately unbothered. "I told you," Adrian said, his voice steady but cool. "I'm enjoying my Saturday at my house." The woman let out a dry laugh that had no humor in it. "Your house? This is the Colbert property." Adrian raised an eyebrow, amused now. "That's right, Adrian Colbert." He pointed to himself with the same hand that held his drink. "Nice to meet you." The man squinted, clearly thrown off, but unwilling to back down. "Adrian Colbert." He dragged out the syllables like he was checking for a lie. "Funny, we've lived here for 8 years, and I've never seen you before." Adrian leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Well, that's probably because I've been busy building a company instead of hanging out at HOA meetings. That one hit. The woman straightened up, her lips pursing like she'd bitten into something sour. You expect us to believe this house belongs to you? She asked, her voice rising. This home is worth, what, $4-5 million? And you just live here? Adrian's smile faded. There it was, the mask slipping. The disbelief in her tone was louder than her words. Yes, he said flatly. I live here. The man scoffed. Yeah, right. So what's your proof? Adrian chuckled under his breath. Proof? You're asking me for proof? In my own backyard? He stood up now, slow and deliberate, his 6-foot frame casting a long shadow over the patio tiles. You know, I've had neighbors before, some friendly, some nosy. But you two? You're setting a new record. He walked toward the edge of the pool, close enough to the fence that he could see the flush creeping up the man's neck. What's your name? Adrian asked. The man blinked. Excuse me? Your name, Adrian repeated calmly. You came to my house, asking questions. I figure it's only fair I know who I'm talking to. Greg, the man muttered finally, his voice stiff. Greg Simmons, and this is my wife, Patricia. Adrian nodded slowly. Greg, Patricia, good to know. He crossed his arms, mirroring Greg's posture, but with none of the tension. Now, Greg, Patricia, what exactly made you think I didn't belong here? Patricia let out a sharp exhale. Don't play games with us. This is a secure community. We know who lives here. We've never seen you before, so obviously, something's off. Adrian tilted his head, his voice dropping to something almost conversational. Or maybe what's off is your assumption that someone who looks like me can't own this. Patricia's eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Greg's jaw clenched harder. Look, Greg said finally, his tone clipped. We're just looking out for the neighborhood. That's all. Adrian gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it this time. Right, just looking out. For a moment, the air went dead quiet. Even the birds had stopped chirping. Then Greg pulled out his phone. Adrian noticed the movement instantly. What are you doing? Greg didn't look up. Calling security. If you really live here, you won't mind proving it. But Greg wasn't calling security. His thumb was tapping 911. And that was the moment Adrian knew this wasn't just a chat over the fence anymore. Greg's phone was already pressed against his ear before Adrian could say another word. The man paced along the fence line like he was about to report a break-in. Yeah, hi, Greg said loudly, making sure Adrian could hear every syllable. There's a suspicious man in our neighborhood. He's in someone's backyard. I think he might be trespassing. Adrian closed his eyes for half a second and exhaled. Suspicious man. Someone's backyard. Trespassing. He knew the script by heart. Patricia added fuel without even being asked. Make sure they come quickly, she said, her voice sharp and cutting. This guy is acting aggressive. Adrian looked at her in disbelief. Aggressive? I haven't moved a foot toward you, he said calmly. You walked to my house. You're standing at my fence. Patricia didn't respond. She just folded her arms, staring him down like a judge waiting to hand out a sentence. Greg turned his back slightly, muttering more details into the phone. Adrian caught fragments. Won't identify himself. Claims he lives here. Could be dangerous. Dangerous. That word hit harder than he wanted to admit. It wasn't the first time he'd been called that without reason, but standing in his own backyard, wearing swim trunks and a t-shirt, iced tea still sweating on the table behind him, it felt surreal. He spoke up, his voice calm but edged with steel. Greg, Patricia, let me make something clear. This is my home. I have zero obligation to prove that to you, but you just made a mistake. Greg spun around, phone still to his ear. Oh yeah? What mistake is that? Adrian walked back to the patio table, picked up his phone, and tapped the screen. The security app opened instantly, showing live feeds from every angle of the property, including one aimed directly at Greg and Patricia. Smile, Adrian said coolly, turning the screen toward them. You're on camera, and so is this conversation. Greg hesitated, his eyes flicking to the camera mounted near the fence line. For a split second, doubt flashed across his face, but then stubbornness took over. Good, Greg snapped. Then the cops will see it too. They'll figure out who really belongs here. Adrian chuckled under his breath. They will, he said softly. They definitely will. Patricia leaned closer to Greg, whispering something Adrian couldn't catch. He didn't need to. He knew the type: whisperers, plotters, people who thought rules bent in their direction. Look, Adrian said, his voice firm but calm. You've got about 10 seconds to hang up that phone before you do something you really regret. Greg laughed. It was short and harsh, the kind of laugh meant to intimidate. What are you gonna do? Threaten us? Adrian took a step closer to the fence, his eyes locking on Greg's. No, I don't make threats. I make calls. And trust me, mine carry a little more weight than yours. Greg's smirk faltered, but he didn't hang up. Adrian heard the dispatcher on the other end asking for more details. Yeah, Greg said quickly. He's tall, mid-40s, maybe 6 foot, dark skin, athletic build, wearing a white t-shirt, gray shorts. He looks like he doesn't belong. There it was. He looks like he doesn't belong. The words punched harder than any insult. Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Patricia, Adrian said, shifting his gaze to her, you've got kids, right? Her eyes widened. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, Adrian replied, because one day they might be in a place they worked hard to earn, and someone like you might walk up and decide they don't belong either. For the first time, Patricia's expression cracked. Just a flicker. But Greg? He was too far gone. Police are on their way, Greg barked. You better have ID ready. Adrian slipped his hands into his pockets, calm as ever. Oh, don't worry, he said softly. I'll be ready. But Adrian wasn't planning to just show ID. He had something else in mind, something that would make Greg and Patricia wish they'd walked away while they had the chance. The air in Adrian's backyard felt heavier now. Greg had ended the 911 call and slid his phone back into his pocket like he'd just handled a national security threat. Patricia stood stiff as a statue, her sun hat tilting slightly as if even it wanted to escape this mess. Adrian sat back down on his lounge chair, crossing one leg over the other like he had all the time in the world. His phone buzzed. A message from his head of security, Malcolm. Everything good, boss? Cameras flagged 2 unknowns at the perimeter. Adrian smirked and typed back quickly. Neighbors, handle from here. Greg's voice broke the silence. Police will be here any minute. So, I suggest you come up with some proof, or you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Adrian laughed under his breath, the sound low and sharp. Handcuffs? For sitting by my own pool? That'll be a headline. Patricia rolled her eyes. Don't play the victim. If you really own this place, this could have been over 5 minutes ago. Adrian set his drink down slowly and stood, towering over the patio like a man about to give a TED Talk on consequences. You know what's funny? You talk about proof like it's a game, but the thing about proof is, it doesn't just work one way. Greg frowned, his forehead creasing like wrinkled paper. What's that supposed to mean? Adrian raised his phone, opening the app again. He tapped on the mic icon. Activate audio record. Send live stream to legal counsel. A robotic voice responded through the speakers. Recording and streaming initiated. Greg shifted uncomfortably. What the hell are you doing? Covering myself, Adrian replied, because while you're calling the cops, I'm building a case. Harassment, false report, racial discrimination. Oh, and let's not forget slander. You just described me to 911 as a threat because you didn't like how I looked in my own backyard. That's a lawsuit, Greg. And lawsuits? They love evidence. Patricia's face drained of color, but Greg doubled down. You're bluffing. Adrian's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call. From Jordan Blake, his attorney. Adrian hit speaker. Jordan, Adrian said smoothly, got a situation. 2 neighbors accusing me of trespassing on my own property. They called the police. Jordan's voice was crisp and calm. Everything's recorded. Video and audio, live streams in your inbox. Good, Jordan said. Do not engage further. When officers arrive, identify yourself, then put me on the line. I'll handle the rest. If they escalate, we go legal. Fast. Perfect, Adrian said before ending the call. Greg let out a harsh laugh, but it sounded nervous now. Oh, you think calling a lawyer's gonna scare me? You really think the cops are gonna take your side? Adrian stepped closer to the fence, his voice dropping to something that made Patricia instinctively take half a step back. Greg, Let me give you a free piece of advice. When this is over, you're going to wish you just said hello and walked away. But now, you've put your name on a false police report. And that's not just embarrassing, it's illegal. Patricia's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. For the first time, her confidence cracked. She glanced toward the street nervously, as if hoping the cops would hurry up and end this nightmare. Adrian turned his gaze toward the driveway. In the distance, faint red and blue lights began to flash against the stucco walls of neighboring homes. Sirens didn't wail. They didn't need to. The presence alone was enough to make Patricia clutch her sun hat tighter. Adrian smiled faintly. Looks like the guest list just got bigger. But Adrian wasn't worried about the police. He was about to turn this entire situation into a lesson Greg and Patricia would never forget. The flashing lights reflected against Adrian's sliding glass doors as the first patrol car rolled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out, one male, one female, both scanning the scene like they'd walked into something strange, which they had. Adrian stayed put, standing tall by the pool, calm as ever. Greg waved his arms like he was signaling a rescue helicopter. "Over here," he shouted. "That's him. That's the guy." The officers approached the fence slowly, hands resting near their holsters but not drawn. The male officer spoke first. "Sir," he said to Adrian, voice steady but firm. "We got a call about a possible trespasser. Can we see some ID?" Adrian nodded politely. "Absolutely, officer, but before I do, let me make something clear. I live here. This is my property." He gestured to the massive home behind him, the gleaming pool, the landscaping that screamed money and time. The female officer's eyes flicked from Adrian to Greg. "You're the homeowner?" "Yes," Adrian said evenly. "Adrian Colbert, CEO of Colbert Cybersecurity Solutions. My name's on every document tied to this address." Greg scoffed loudly from behind the officers. "He's lying. I've lived here for years and I've never seen him before. Look at him. Does he look like someone who owns a $5 million property?" That line hung in the air like smoke. Even the officers' expressions shifted slightly. Adrian felt the weight of those words, the way they carried everything Greg didn't dare say out loud. The female officer spoke again, her tone measured. "Sir, if you could just show us some ID, we'll get this sorted out quickly." Adrian reached for his phone and wallet on the lounge chair, slow, deliberate movements. He wasn't about to give anyone an excuse. He handed over his driver's license first, then opened an app on his phone that displayed his name on the property deed, HOA records, and even the security system dashboard, all tied to him. "Everything you need is right here," Adrian said calmly. "Address matches the license. The property's registered under my name and trust." The officers exchanged a look. The female officer nodded slightly, confirming the match. "Okay, Mr. Colbert," she said, her tone softening. "Thank you for cooperating." Greg's face twisted. "You're just going to take his word for it?" The male officer turned to Greg, his voice clipped now. "Sir, his ID and documentation match the property records. He's the legal owner." Patricia's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. Adrian slid his sunglasses back on, his voice smooth as glass. "Anything else you need, officers? Or are we done here?" The female officer hesitated, then shook her head. "No, sir, you're good. Sorry for the inconvenience." Adrian gave a polite nod, then pointed toward Greg without even looking at him. "You might want to explain to these officers why you made a false report. I'm sure the dispatcher has everything on record." Greg's face went from red to pale in seconds. "False report? I was protecting the neighborhood." The male officer's tone turned sharp. "Sir, calling in a false emergency can carry penalties. If the homeowner wants to press charges, that's his right." Greg's jaw worked like he was chewing rocks. Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear behind her sun hat. Adrian stepped forward, resting his hands casually on the fence. "Don't worry," he said softly, his voice calm, but with an edge that could cut steel. "I'm not pressing charges. Yet." The officers started to wrap things up, but Adrian wasn't finished. Not even close. Because while Greg thought this was over, Adrian was already planning the next move. The one that would flip this entire situation on its head. The officers gave Greg and Patricia a quick rundown of the penalties for making false reports, but Adrian? He was already several steps ahead. This wasn't going to end with a warning. Not after what they'd pulled. "Officers," Adrian said calmly, sliding his phone from his pocket. "Before you leave, I'd like you to witness something, just for the record." The female officer raised an eyebrow. What's that, sir? Adrian tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. The call rang twice before a voice answered, sharp and professional. Jordan Blake, the voice said. Jordan, Adrian replied, his tone smooth. You're live on speaker. 2 officers are here with me. My neighbors, Greg Simmons and Patricia Simmons, just accused me of trespassing on my own property and called the police. Everything's recorded on my security system and streamed to your inbox. I'd like to proceed with a formal complaint for harassment and filing a false report. Greg's head snapped up. What? You can't do that. Jordan's voice was calm, almost amused. Oh, Mr. Simmons, we absolutely can. Under Arizona law, filing a knowingly false police report is a misdemeanor. Couple that with harassment, and you're looking at civil liability. Considering Mr. Colbert's status and the damages to his reputation, this could get very expensive for you. Patricia finally spoke, her voice cracking. Wait, we didn't mean any harm. We didn't recognize him. Adrian's sunglasses reflected the sunlight as he turned his gaze to her. Didn't recognize me? Patricia, you described me to the dispatcher as a threat. In my backyard, relaxing by my pool. That's not concern. That's profiling. And I'm done letting people like you slide for it. Greg's fists clenched. This is ridiculous. You're blowing this out of proportion. Jordan's chuckle over the phone was dry and cutting. Greg, the last thing you want is this going to court or the media. False 911 calls, harassment based on bias. I can see the headlines now. Patricia's face drained of color. Please, she stammered. Can we just work this out? We didn't mean for it to go this far. Adrian tilted his head. Work it out? You mean like how you could have just walked away instead of playing neighborhood sheriff? You didn't care about consequences then. The female officer cleared her throat. Mr. Colbert, if you'd like to file a report, we can assist. Adrian nodded slowly. Oh, I'll be filing something. Don't worry about that. He looked at Greg, his voice calm but razor sharp. You've got 2 options. 1, I press charges, and your names become a public record tied to racial harassment. 2, you issue a written and video apology, and you make a 5-figure donation to the community youth tech program I fund downtown. Today, before sunset. Greg's jaw dropped. You're blackmailing us. Adrian's smile didn't reach his eyes. No, Greg, I'm giving you a choice. And trust me, you want option 2. Patricia grabbed Greg's arm, panic flickering in her eyes. Greg, just do it, please. Adrian slipped his phone back into his pocket and picked up his glass of iced tea, taking a slow sip like the king of his own chessboard. I'll give you an hour. After that, my lawyer takes over. Greg didn't answer. He just stood there, seething, his face blotched red. Patricia nodded quickly, her voice trembling. We'll do it. Adrian gave a single nod, then turned his back on them and walked toward the glass doors of his home like this was nothing more than a business deal. But Adrian knew this was more than business. This was a message, and he intended to make sure they never forgot it. An hour later, Adrian sat in his sleek home office, floor-to-ceiling windows, pouring in golden Arizona sunlight. His laptop screen displayed a live video feed, Greg and Patricia standing stiff in front of their manicured front yard, both looking like they'd swallowed something sour. Jordan's voice came through on speaker. You're live. Go ahead. Greg's throat bobbed as he spoke. We want to apologize to Mr. Colbert for our actions earlier today. We made assumptions that were wrong and unfair. We understand now that what we did was disrespectful and harmful. Patricia jumped in, her voice shaky but clear. We're truly sorry for any hurt we caused. We've agreed to make a donation to the Downtown Youth Tech Program, and we hope to move forward as better neighbors. Adrian leaned back in his leather chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When they finished, he paused for a long moment before replying. Thank you for saying that, he said finally. His tone was calm, almost casual, but underneath it carried weight. Greg, Patricia, this isn't just about me. It's about understanding that assumptions, especially dangerous ones, have consequences. People's lives can be changed or even ended over calls like the one you made today. So next time, before you judge someone for where they are, ask yourself why you're really doing it. Greg nodded stiffly, Patricia muttered something that sounded like agreement. Adrian ended the call without another word. He closed his laptop and walked back outside to the pool. The water shimmered like nothing had ever happened, but the silence wasn't the same. This time, it carried a lesson, a reminder that even when you make it to the top, there are battles you never stop fighting. Adrian sat down on the edge of the pool, feet dipping into the cool water. He didn't feel angry anymore, just resolved. He knew he'd handled this the right way, not with rage, not with violence, but with control, with power, and with a plan that turned ignorance into accountability. He glanced toward the street. The patrol cars were long gone. Greg and Patricia's house sat quiet, its windows shut tight. Adrian smiled faintly, not out of spite, but out of victory. The kind that comes when you don't just protect your name, but use the moment to make a point. And for anyone watching, for anyone listening, that point was clear. Never assume, never judge, and never think someone doesn't belong just because they don't fit your picture. Adrian reached for his glass, now filled with melting ice. He took a long sip and let the sun warm his shoulders. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his. Every inch of it earned. Because respect isn't something you give based on status. It's something you give because everyone deserves it. What would you have done in Adrian's position? Would you have taken legal action or handled it differently? Let me know in the comments, and if you believe respect matters more than assumptions, share this video with someone who needs to hear it.